French astrology, until the 60s, was not invaded by philosophy or spirituality or even psychoanalysis. And therefore, the question of the individual was not central, as it has become later on. Rudyard had chosen to focus on the person. Astrology was supposed to treat of the person, of the personality, of its individuality, its individuation. What will become of the person? What he will make of himself? I do not approve this evolution, this line of work. Astrology has, according to me, has to remain at a general level, has to fix a number of general laws concerning mankind, especially concerning women, as would do some gynecologists. It is true that at a certain point, what is general will have specific applications and developments. But that doesn't belong to astrology. It is beyond astrology. In the same way as when you sell a new car, you don't know what will happen with it. You don't know what sort of accidents will occur. It is not the work of the engineer who builds a car in a factory. It is the work of a garage. We have here the dialectic between normality and pathology. It is essential for all the field of human sciences. You cannot deny the importance of all sorts of pathology and the need of studying those pathologies. Of course not. But it is the same way with medicine. There's a medicine of the normalcy, and there's a medicine of pathology. Like there is an astrology of normalcy, of normal state, and there is an astrology of pathology of specific cases. Because pathology is always, in a certain way, specific, personal. It's always also centered on a certain part of the body. When you are healthy, you don't have any special part of the body which is a problem. So, it's what I call Martian. Martian makes differences. Venusian takes the whole, holistic approach. So, there's a Martian astrology which is pathological, and there is a Venusian astrology which is about normalcy, general things, general norms, general laws. And there is a fight between these two levels, struggle, and we can say that today the Martian astrology has won the battle. It's not a war. And that people, although what is funny is there is still in the newspapers these columns about the signs which are related to a normal astrology, to a Venusian astrology. But in the offices of astrologers, when astrologers receive people, advise people personally, you are here in a Martian astrology. So we still have this difference in a way or another. Two totally different approaches. One approach, which is Venusian, tells us how much we belong to a whole, how much do we belong to a group, a general group, gender. For instance, when you are a wife, a woman, you have a body, and your body works in a certain way. And if it doesn't work properly, then you pass through pathology. Pathology is to do with Mars, because Mars also is a surgeon who will attack the body, will interfere with the body to save it. Cut it. And cut the tumor, cut what is sick, what is ill. So as I said, with the 70s we were invaded by karmic astrology, by Rudyard astrology, humanistic astrology, person-centered astrology, astrology of the soul. And this has finally put astrology in the field of divination as a result. When you try to understand things which are too complex, too specific, you are quitting the level of science. I have here a book by Peter Ward about the strings, the theory of strings in physics. And he says that the problem with this theory is that it's too complicated. He tries to explain too many things, and by doing that, its patterns are unfalsifiable, because you cannot predict, you cannot only explain. To make predictions, you have to possess a simple matter. And the only thing when your pattern doesn't work is to improve it. Not to improve it by adding things, but to improve it by redefining certain elements at certain levels, and finding what's wrong in the structure, in the application, etc. So, in fact, what is funny when I read the book of Peter Ward on strings, and the original title was Not Even Wrong. Not even wrong. Yeah, which is very significant. Not even wrong, that is, you can't even prove it's wrong. It's so bizarre that it cannot be wrong. It's exactly what I would say about the certain form of astrology. It cannot be wrong, it cannot even be wrong. It cannot even be falsified. Or it's not falsifiable in the sense you cannot prove it's false. Not even false. And Barbeau, in one of his books, published I think in 1961, From Psychoanalysis to Astrology, that in fact the chart, by its complexity, was the mirror, the legitimate mirror of the complexity of all personality. That's a sort of vicious circle to we have to understand that we don't have to study everything. We have to stay in the general level. There's a word that many writers use today, it's precision. And precision means, of course, if you follow that line, to be able to make the differences between each case. Precision, finally, means a very complex pattern, necessarily. What I believe is, that astrology has kept a lot of information of all sorts of classifications and constructions which were not able to work for some reasons, because they were corrupted, they were transformed, they were unapplicable, they were not well defined, etc. So my line is not that. My line is improve the pattern as much as possible, but keep it as simple, I would say, William of Ockham, as simple as possible. Do not be under the temptation of complexifying things, complexifying the models. I always say that when you have a wrong model, wrong categories, you have an illusion of complexity. Complexity is the price of a bad pattern. Every time you have an impression of complexity, you can always find that probably the pattern was not properly defined, properly applied, etc. It is very interesting. Instead of observing that something is wrong, that it has to be reconsidered, no, it's not wrong. The complexity is the truth, and my pattern was not complex enough. That's what they say. So we have to make it more complicated, more complex. And if we make it more complex, we will understand more easily reality. As simple as that. So this is an anti-scientific approach of things. This point is well known, and I have pointed this problem a long time ago, at the beginning of the 80s. I was saying, let's be simple, but let's improve our models of patterns. That's the key. When your model is not proper, the complexity will immediately appear. Oh, this doesn't work. Oh, probably it is more complex than that. Probably I must not simplify reality. I must stick to the complexity of reality. That's what people think. I've been searching all sorts of correlations for the last 40 years and more than that. And practicing astrology, I've not been working in personal studies. Well, yes, I have been in a way, but I really think that many astrologers have a sort of routine, and that they are not improving and progressing in their work, even through decades. What I see is that, in general, one improves a model not through practice, but through the model that you perceive as being not necessarily developed as it should have been. What I mean by that is fundamental research, theoretical research, will generally be much more useful than practical one. Of course, you have to practice to see that the transformation of your theory has better results. That's obvious. It explains things clearly. For instance, I don't know, you change the moment of a new period. You say, for instance, oh, I thought the period will begin at this time, at this moment, and no, it will begin earlier or later. It makes a big difference. But it has to come from the inner theory. And you have to be able to improve the theory structurally, to become conscious that something was wrong with your theory. But you cannot afford to complexify your theory for that. This is suicide, intellectual suicide. The theory has to be simple and simple, simpler and simpler. As Occam would say, only keep the necessary ideas. I am horrified when I hear people defining astrology as a study of the person, of the individual. It is a very, very tricky definition. Very unfair in a way. Unfair for astrology itself. Why would you like to make things more complicated? Just start by saying that astrology is a study of mankind, or a study of female, if you want. But don't say it's a study of the person. No, that's unacceptable. It is true that when you have a person, and you compare this person to the normal process, you may be able to discover the pathology. Because if you don't have the normal process, how can you know that someone is sick? How can you know that something is wrong? Something can only be considered as wrong by comparison to a general process. So if you do not have this general process, you are unable to repair and to restore things. The problem is that a doctor has to bring his patient back to health. A garage has to bring the car back to a normal function. But what is how can you check that an astrologer is working properly? I wonder, what obligation of resolve does he have? I wonder. The first thing is to declare, the astrologer has to declare that from his pattern, the person coming to him is acting normally or not, properly or not. That is what he has to say. This is not prediction. This is confrontation between astrology and the person. It's what Rudyard would say in a way, but he would say that in a very paradoxical way. He would say, oh, the person doesn't correspond to his chart, to his own chart. But the chart is not a law, the chart is not a norm, the chart is not something general. So how can you say that a chart is a reference for norm? Recently I was interviewing one astrologer, and she would say, yes, the chart tells us what we are really, and can tell us that some things we do are not convenient for us. Good. The principle is good, but the reality is that it is not the chart which is a reference, it is the pattern. And the pattern is a general pattern which is much, much more simpler than the chart. This is the problem, astrology can only work. The chart in the best case, and I don't believe that, but in the best case would be a representation of the pathology of the person. A prediction on its pathology. Exactly, he would say, well, I sell this car and I can tell you already what problems will this car have in its life, in its career. It's ridiculous. We can compare the person to a norm, to a law, if we have something like that. If astrologer has something like that. Until now they don't have it, they have the chart, the individual chart, which is not what we need. So it's like the gynecologist, he compares the person coming to his office to what he knows about what is a normal person, a normal woman, expecting to have a chart. And if something doesn't correspond, there's something wrong, and he has to treat that something wrong. The astrologer is in the same situation. He has a good pattern, a clear pattern, which works in general, and he will check if in that specific case which is coming to him, it corresponds. So you have two solutions here. Or you would say, oh, if it does not correspond, it's because my pattern is not proper. Or the other idea is, if it does not correspond, it's because my pattern is not complicated enough. I have to bring more precision to be more in connection with the case I have to treat. You see? That's the dilemma.